I got my first job in town when I was 16 years old. It was at the local Stewart's, a gas station and convenience store found throughout the northeastern United States. Because I was still a high school student when I first started working there, most of my shifts were later in the day, and because I didn't have a car of my own, whenever I didn't have a ride, I would have to walk home. It wasn't really that bad though. It was only about a 20-minute walk, and on the days that I went to work from my house instead of school, I would just take my bike and cut the travel time down by more than half. After a while though, I realized that getting my license should be my number one priority. I figured this out after I had just finished a shift in the middle of May that year. It was around 8 p.m. by the time I got out, and the shoulders on the side of the road were smaller because of the piled up snow. This meant that on my walk home, I was pretty much just walking on the road. And because it was really dark by that time, to be safe, I made sure to shine my phone's flashlight on the ground in front of me to alert any oncoming drivers that I was there. The only problem was since it was the end of the day, my phone was already pretty old. The battery drained super quickly, and before I even made it a quarter of the way home, it died. That's why I was thankful when I noticed headlights coming up from behind me, and as they passed me, I saw a large 18-wheeler truck pull off the side of the road. Now, nothing bad ever really happened in my town, so I wasn't too wary of accepting help from new people. So when this guy offered me a ride after saying that he almost didn't see me, I quickly took him up on his offer. The man driving the truck looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, and as far as I could tell, he was as nice as could be. He asked me where I was going, and I let him know that my house was just up the road, and we began heading that way. During the ride, we talked about work, and I asked him how long he's been a truck driver. He told me that he'd been driving since he was 18 years old, and when I asked him what company he worked for, he just said, "Oh, here and there," which I know I should have taken as a sign that he might not have actually worked for a company around my area like he said he did. I didn't think anything of it though, and was enjoying the ride until I let him know that the turn from my road was coming up on the left. He didn't seem to respond to what I was saying, so I told him again that my turn was coming up, but again, he didn't react. I went to reach into my pocket so that I could pull my phone out, which was when he told me, "Don't do that." I looked over at him, confused about what was going on, but growing more and more concerned by the second. And when he officially passed the turn for the street that my house was on, my chest began to pound. I continued to look at the man as I tried to tell him that we missed my street, but the words wouldn't come out. After a second, he looked over to me and gave me a small chuckle before saying very calmly, "Just don't do anything stupid and you'll be fine." I turned to face the dashboard as I tried to run through every way that I could possibly make it out of the truck without him catching me. And that was when I decided that my only chance would be to try to catch him off guard. I asked him where he planned on taking me, hoping that I could distract him while I slowly used my right hand to get my phone out of my pocket. But once I had it in my hand, I remembered that it was dead, so calling for help would be useless. However, just as I was about to give up hope on my phone, I thought of something that ended up saving my life. I took a deep breath before using my left hand to unclick my seatbelt, and as soon as that caught the driver's attention, I threw my phone at his head as hard as I could. Now, I know that it wasn't far enough to really get speed on my throw, but I used to pitch for the middle school and high school baseball teams, so I knew that I could do a little bit of damage if I tried. The phone smacked the man in the face, sending his head into his hands as he clutched his nose. I took this opportunity to unlock and open the truck door, and without thinking about the consequences, I jumped. I tucked and rolled as I hit the ground, but I felt something pop in my hip as I rolled along the pavement. I couldn't waste any time though. I knew that we only passed my road a minute or so before that, so I knew that I wasn't far from home. So I got up and began sprinting through the woods along the side of the road and didn't look back. As soon as I made it up to my porch, I threw myself into the house and locked the door shut behind me before calling the police. My mom got home about an hour after the incident, and the police were still on our driveway. After taking my statement and a description of the truck, the police had my mom take me to the hospital. Nothing was broken from the fall, but I did have a bruised hip bone. Most importantly, I was alive. Growing up with a truck driver for a dad meant that there would be weeks at a time when I didn't really get to see him because he was driving so much. But it definitely paid the bills at home and made it so my family and I could eat. I was quickly deterred from following in his footsteps, though, after spending 3 days on the road with him. I had just turned 12, and for my birthdays, I had practically begged him to let me go with him. And finally, he agreed. It was a short trip compared to the route he usually drove, and we both thought it would be a great bonding experience. And it was. We had a lot of fun at the start of the drive, just listening to music and eating some burgers on the road. And that first night, when we slept in the cab, it sort of felt like I was camping. I couldn't have been happier. But the next day, my dad tried to teach me a lesson that I think everyone could learn, which is to be kind to others, even if you don't know them. Only, I doubt he expected it to backfire the way it did. Now, I should point out that this was during the 90s, and people were a lot more trusting of others back then. And on top of that, my dad was always a bigger guy, so there weren't many people who could intimidate him. That being said, as we were driving down the road, we both noticed a man walking along the shoulder, and right away my dad started to slow down. At first, I thought it was just to safely go around him, but instead my dad pulled the truck up beside him and asked him where he was going and if he needed a ride. I'll never forget the smile on the man's face. It was like my dad had just done the nicest thing in the world for this guy. He let us know that he was just walking back to his house, which was a couple miles up the road. So my dad told me to hop in the back and told the man to get in. We started driving again, and my dad started talking with the man who seemed to be a really nice guy. But once we had gotten to the road that he told us he lived on, we saw that his driveway was a long dirt path. And since there was no way my dad's truck would have been able to turn around in it, he let the man know that we would have to drop him off at the end of the pathway. The man didn't like this for some reason, and all of his gratefulness seemed to disappear from his body. Instead of asking my dad to drive him down the dirt road, it sounded like he was beginning to demand it. And when he began to raise his voice, my dad had finally had enough. He informed the hitchhiker that he had me in the truck with him and very respectfully asked the man to calm down. That was when I saw the man beginning to fumble around in his pocket. I slid myself further back into the cab of the truck as I saw him pull out a knife from his pocket and point it toward my dad. My dad asked the man to calm down again and tried to usher him to lower the knife. But the hitchhiker just grew more agitated for some reason. He began demanding my dad's wallet and asking what else he had on him. The man took the wallet, but when he learned that we didn't have anything else, he turned to look at me. My dad tried to gain his attention back, but the man took it as a threat and thrust the blade in his hand forward. My dad took in a deep breath as the knife penetrated his stomach. That was when the man removed the knife and turned to me. I don't know what I would have done if my dad hadn't still been conscious. Before the man could turn his knife on me, my dad lunged at the man and grabbed a hold of him. I took the opportunity to reach forward and unlock the passenger side door, which my dad threw the man out of. We quickly closed the door and locked it. My dad didn't waste time. He pulled away from the man who had just attacked us and drove himself to the hospital. It was there that we were able to talk to the police, who managed to find the man who we had picked up. He was walking down the road we had left him on, and when the police apprehended him, he actually began to overdose on whatever substance he had taken before we picked him up. He ended up at the same hospital that my dad and I were in before being charged with assault. I loved my time working in Arizona, especially when I was working as a driver for the Ross Distribution Center. It was the best trucking job I ever had because I typically never had to work any overnight shifts. Most of my shipments would only take me about 3 hours away from the distribution center, which meant that, unlike most truckers, I got to spend most nights at home with my family. I'll never forget the one time that I didn't make it home after my shift though. It started as I was picking up a newly filled trailer for my truck that I was going to be taking to 3 of the Ross stores in the area. When I showed up at the distribution center, I was told that it might take a while to load up the truck because they were short-staffed. So I offered to lend a hand, and they were so short-handed that they allowed it. I helped another worker in the warehouse load boxes and pallets into the truck that I was going to be hauling off, and we were done in no time at all. They thanked me, and then I began making my way to the first store. It wasn't until about an hour into my drive that I realized that I had left my water bottle in the back of the truck. Now, anyone who has been in Arizona in the summer will tell you that hydration is essential. It can get blistering hot outside. I was getting thirsty and knew that I had about 45 minutes until I reached the first store on my route. So I decided to pull off down a small gravel road that I had taken before to use the bathroom and stop the truck. I turned the truck off and ran to get my water bottle out of the trailer. I hopped inside and began looking around, hoping that it wasn't buried underneath any boxes. Thankfully, I spotted it. It had fallen over and was sitting at an angle between a few boxes, but I could easily reach it, so it wasn't a big deal. That was until I stepped forward. I don't know exactly what caused it. It could have been the subtle shake of the trailer as I walked through it, or that I simply didn't open the door all the way, but before I knew it, the door to the trailer began falling shut behind me. And to make matters worse, as it slammed close, I could practically hear the sound of the latch falling into place at the bottom of the door, meaning I couldn't open it up from the inside no matter how hard I tried. I tried my best not to panic as I tried to think of a way out of the trailer. There was no way to open the door, and I didn't think I would need my phone, so I ended up leaving it plugged in up front. I began to hyperventilate as I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get out until someone found and helped me. I hoped that someone from the Ross that I was supposed to show up at would call my manager's office, but even if they did, I don't know how they would find me. It's not like I told my boss that I was going to be stopping for a bathroom break. The first day was the worst of it. I had never felt the heat so intense in my life. It was as if I was standing inside of a toaster oven, slowly being cooked. I could feel myself getting lightheaded after about an hour, and once I had finished all of my water, all I could do was hope to be found soon. It wasn't long before I passed out, and the next thing I remember is the trailer door of my truck being thrown open. I remember the sunlight was blinding, and then everything went black again before I finally woke up at the hospital. I had been passed out in the back of the truck for presumably 12 hours and wasn't found until the next morning, when a family who lived down the gravel road had driven by and called the police. The doctors said it was a miracle that I didn't suffer any permanent brain damage from heat and dehydration.